Welcome to Making Pondo and Talking Pondo. Talking Pondo is a podcast where we pick out 2 movies each week and talk about them in detail. Making Pondo is a podcast where we talk to people we've made films with and we discuss all their experiences on set. Today on Making Pondo, we feature Eric Schumacher, who has acted in 3 of our feature films, and we even co-wrote the web series John the Alien Interviews for him. All right, and welcome back.
Yes. Today on Making Pondo, we have Eric Schumacher, the actor, producer, director, all-around extraordinaire guy.
I'm extraordinaire? Cool. I've always wanted to be that. Can I put that in my bio from now on?
You can.
Extraordinaire guy?
We said it, so it must be true.
Must be true. Yeah, this is media, so it has to be true.
So we've been working with Eric for, well over a decade now.
4,000 years.
Multiple projects we've done with Eric.
Yeah.
Eric, how did you start working with us, or how did you find Pondo? What was the first thing that brought you to us?
You know, it's actually one of my favorite stories about how a great creative collaboration was formed, which I do consider our collaboration to be that. So I had just done a season of a very early, one of the first narrative streaming series called Crewing Up. And I played a character called Frank Mann, who was kind of a turd, really not a pleasant person, kind of a dumbass, and a lot of fun. He was, some of the best comedy in the series. I was fortunate that some of the best comedy in the series came from that character. And so I was starting to develop a little bit of a fan base for the first time. And I saw an audition notice at this point, headquartered in Tucson, Arizona. And I saw an audition notice, preface this by, I'm a mega nerd. I spent many hours hanging out with my pals in a comic book store and late nights and in the back of the comic book store debating things. So I'm a nerd. I'm nerd royalty. I'd like to think. I try to be. So anyway, I saw this notice for an audition that was happening for a film set in a comic book store, and I had to get there. So,
do you remember what the actual ad said? What do we remember what we actually put in the ad?
I don't remember much, except that it had to do with a comic book store, and I needed to go find out what it was, because that's a rarity. It's a rarity. Nerd culture films, as much as they are beloved by nerds like me, are rare. They just don't happen that often. And so it was, I just had to check it out. And
especially back in 2008.
Yeah, true. I mean, it's certainly grown because it's now acknowledged that nerds like us don't have to be are less put upon. More people acknowledge that they like fandom and are and nerd out about something, and so it's a lot easier to be a nerd these days. And of course, the commercial power of nerdism is finally acknowledged. So
the commercial power of
it's
nerdism.
It's true. I mean, look, when we went from at one point decades ago, your standard science fiction or fantasy convention would maybe be a couple of hundred people, and now, and that still happens at some really great small conventions, but also we have Comic-Cons where 130,000 people show up, and that's cool. So both are cool, actually. I love the intimate experience as well. But anyway, so shorter story, I went to the audition, and I was handed sides by someone, and for those who don't know, who aren't in the industry, sides are pieces of the script that are used to read and to audition. So they're usually, maybe 1 to 3 pages. They're usually very short, so you kind of get in and get out. And I was handed a small book. It was a large chunk of the script, about 3 scenes, and I read it, and I immediately fell in love with a particular character, John. I said to myself, this guy is basically me, but but a little bit more frenetic, a little bit more uptight. And I know this guy. I really, rarely in an audition do I really want a role as badly as I wanted it when I read that character. So I'm sitting there reading it and really finding him quickly. And now I start to get nervous. I mean, now I really want this thing. So I'm called into the audition room. I walk in, and this very nice fellow with a very good energy looks up at me and says, "Oh my God, you're Frank Mann." And I went, "Yes!"
Ha!
And so
Recognition.
I gave the read, and fortunately didn't entirely screw it up, and was cast as John Burns, the role I was hoping for,
Yeah,
so that's how
they
we
used to
started.
show they used to show that Crewing Up web show on the Access station, and that's where I had discovered you from. So I
Mm-hmm,
was already
mm-hmm.
watching that show because Jonathan Ziegler, who was one of the camera
Yes.
operators and sound
Mm-hmm.
operators on Writing Frenzy, he was involved in that show too, and I already knew him, and so just
Right.
that small town led us
Yeah,
to
yeah.
finally
It was
meeting each other.
it was a small homegrown thing, and I was just coming out of theater and really pushing hard into media, and it was a really great opportunity to get out there in something that was relatively new in the world, and yeah, so great. I mean, that's uh, it was just it was a nice series of events, and then of course we worked together on Writing Frenzy, and that's still, as small and challenging as so many things were, just by the nature of the massiveness of the project and the few hands to make it work. It still stands as one of my favorite filmmaking experiences, and I think from that in particular, Marty and I formed a solid friendship and collaboration,
Hmm.
and as I did with a number of other people who worked on that, like Nate Campbell, of course, who played
Right.
Pete and still does, and pretty much is Pete in real life, in my opinion.
Well, I mean,
you know,
to that note, I mean, the it's like I was Marty and I talked about this after we did all of our all of our auditions and stuff, and it was just there was really no. Marty, I really don't remember there being any really thought of anybody else doing those two roles. Like
Yeah,
they just seemed like
both
they
of
were just
them
kind of
really
written
nailed it.
for them. Yeah, yeah.
awesome. Yeah,
And
Yeah.
Nate had never been anything before, and he was just so his comedic timing is just so
Mhm.
natural.
yeah, really. It's yeah, I know that was a very early role for him, and we just we clicked, and exactly that. Yeah, his comedic timing was right on, and and we're not exactly those people off screen, and in fact, this is unusual for me because I'm best known for disappearing. I'm best known for playing people nothing like me, or very very far away from me. So it was odd that I would find a role that was so close to large aspects of me and that I'd want it.
Yeah,
um,
I remember you saying something like, "Yeah, normally I play like tough guys and I do action
really a lot of that.
stuff and
Yeah.
that I didn't know that you had you had kung fu and background martial arts background and had
Hmm.
been studying for years, but I thought this guy really like because the only thing I've ever seen is John as John, and I'm like that's not a John doesn't beat people up like
That's
it's
where all those
just
slapping skills come from. Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah, that's
no,
where those slapping skills come from. Yeah, you good point.
that was fun. In Writing Frenzy, there's that scene where John and Pete have a slapping fight,
Mhm.
and as much as I've trained in martial arts, I'm no fight choreographer, and so that you have to actually, when you've trained in the science of hand to hand combat, you have to very consciously not actually use it when you're doing a real fight scene, and in the case of a slappy scene, it was actually kind of liberating to just do exactly the opposite of everything you're trained, um, and and a great deal of fun. Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's true. I mean, I often do play intimidating characters, and either that or really whack job oddballs, and so the Frank Mann was actually quite an exception to that rule as well. He was you know just a kind of a doofus, um, but
He reminds me a lot of Andy from The Office.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Without the
definitely.
singing, but that sort of energy and that sort of
Hmm.
jackassery.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, exactly. Um,
Yeah, that
and
Writing Frenzy.
interestingly enough, since then I've continued to play a lot of mostly, kind of badass tough guy characters, or again just sort of people who are just borderline insane or things like that.
Yeah,
It's just
I'd like to delve into that a little bit more here. uh, writing Frenzy's always going to be a special project to me. It's the first Pondo project where everything really clicked into place, and everything's kind of been solid since then. Of course, there's ups and downs, but that was the one where it was like, yes, we really can make something of quality that people are responding to. And then that led us into writing the web show, Jean, the alien interviews
John
with
the
you, where
Alien
you get to
Interviews.
play another, not similar character, but like you're saying, one of these. I don't know. Is the Agent Killjoy a badass, Cliff? I think
I,
he thinks he
I
is in his mind.
I think he is.
Hmm.
I don't think that he thinks he is. Does that make sense?
Right.
Like I think he's got the skills. I just don't think that's the first place he goes when he's dealing with situations.
Right. I think yeah, David is a favorite character of mine, and you guys wrote him. Thanks. And I was of course did a lot of the producing on that show and played David and what I really appreciated about David, and the way that I felt that he needed to be played, was exactly that, Cliff. He was a character who he didn't go to violence first or even second or third, but he had it. It was
Right.
behind him. He was very tough, but would only use that as a last resort, and instead would use psychological means and actually his main feature, I think, was that he felt he had a duty. He
Yeah.
was all about doing the right thing, and as he changed his understanding of circumstances, what the right thing was became clearer and changed.
Yeah,
Um,
that's well said. Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
and that was really what motivated him, was a sense of duty to protect people. Really, that's what he
Mhm.
was about.
Well,
And
and it seemed like in the beginning of the show, he was like, yeah, because he works for his dad and he works for
yeah,
the
yeah.
government. So he's like, these are the things I trust. I trust my dad and the government.
Hmm. Hmm.
And then by the end of it, he's like, I don't trust either of those things.
Right. And instead
I trust the people that I know.
you trust. Yeah, that was it. It ended up that he found a different family, which is
Mhm.
actually kind of a Pondo theme, if you think
Well,
about it.
when you work with, that's kind of why we're making this, I think, is because for us, I feel like it's almost like a historical document. Um, the people that we've worked with and talking about the films that we've made. And also, I mean, we've said it a million times. Once you work with us, you're sort of in the family.
Hmm.
You're Pondo-esque. So, you've seen it. We use a lot of the same people in our films
Sure.
over and
Yeah.
over again.
Yeah. Definitely. And it's a good thing to do when all of the chemistry works, and when everyone works well together and meshes well together. You know what you get. And
Mhm.
there's a certain level of familiarity and trust that comes with that relationship that's very hard to it's nice when you're not starting from zero.
Yes. Plus, you get to see everybody, man. Like, I mean,
Yeah,
you
reunion.
know,
Yeah,
I mean, that's one of my favorite things is writing Julie into a part in a movie because I'm like,
yeah,
oh, I'm
yeah.
going to get to see I'm going to get to see her on set and see how she's doing.
Right. Yeah. There's.
She's because we've known her since she was 14.
I
Um,
know. I think when I met her on Writing Frenzy, she was 16 at the time, if I recall,
yeah,
and
and now she's a doctor.
now she's a doctor. Amazing.
It's like
Yeah.
what?
It's like
Yeah.
just yesterday, it was like I have to leave. I'm a minor. I can't stay here past a certain time.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you have one
Right.
scene left. Oh yeah, you
Yeah.
do have to leave. Okay, see you
Yeah,
tomorrow.
she's got her
And
mom on set watching us. The whole deal.
Right.
and now it's I'll just fly over there
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll just fly. No
to
problem,
do the
guys.
shoot. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So with
That's good
Jean,
stuff.
was that the first time you did a producing role, Eric?
Not at all. No, I'd done much smaller stuff. I'd mostly done things like commercials and smaller video pieces. I'd also done a lot of other stuff behind the scenes. I was the floor director for a political talk show that we shot a lot of and never actually got off the ground. A
Mm.
bunch of other stuff like that. Um, and But this was the first time that I'd said, let's do something completely insane and long and large. And so it was certainly the first time I'd produced anything on that size.
Mm. So
Um,
is acting your main field in film? Is that the main thing you would like to pursue? Is the acting part?
it's evolved. I mean,
Because I
acting is
noticed
my
you
yeah.
produce, you write, you do a bunch of other things. But
all over
what
the
would the
place.
main things be if you had your druthers? What would you like to do in film?
I think at this point, I think if you'd asked me that question 4 years ago, I would say
Hmm.
that if I could just act, that would be great. Um, Now, if you ask me that question, the answer is that I like the idea of dividing my time between acting, producing, and directing.
Hmm.
Um, there are a lot of aspects of each that are very hard, as you guys very well know, and that are sometimes not a lot of fun. And there are a lot of aspects of each that are extremely rewarding. And so I do like the idea. I mean, acting is still my first love, and it's where my first training came. I was raised by actors, and they and some of their colleagues taught me up very well and gave me a lot of hard to come by knowledge, and then I sought it elsewhere. And I've always had a strong passion for that process and that art and for what can be made out of it. But I'd always, in the back of my mind, I'd always wanted to also create things. And as
Hmm.
I learned more and more and studied, um, I realized that there is an opportunity as an artist to create the stage and then sometimes perform on it as well, and that there's a lot of value in creating the stage too. And sometimes, and there's also a lot of joy in working with other artists. So, as a producer, if you're the the for lack of better words, the creating producer, you you design the product, you design the world that people are going to play in, and you
Hmm.
work with others to do that if you can. And then as a director, you mold the world, and you work with actors and technical folks to and other arts folks to make the world into a particular vision that often evolves into something that the group puts together. Um, and so there's really a lot of value in each. There are I like telling certain kinds of stories, and I think what really got me into producing is that uh, there aren't always opportunities, and so I realized
Try
that I
to
had
make
the
your own.
aptitude and the skill sets to create those opportunities for me and for others. And
Hmm.
I'm also quite passionate about creating opportunity for others, creating business models that will, hopefully lead to um, greater careers for worthy people who are willing to work hard, and also as a general, nerd. It's like oftentimes, uh, depending upon trends and geographic locations and a variety of other things, or even just your own reputation as a performer, what you've done before. Like, if somebody had only seen me as John Burns, I would never have played Doc Holliday, right? If somebody
Hmm.
had only seen me as Doc Holliday, I'd never played John Burns.
Hmm. Yeah, I
um,
wouldn't get.
but there's a lot more in me, and a lot more that I want to do. So, to be quite frank, while there was a greater vision to Jean, for me alone, aside from the goals that I have had for everyone's careers related to that, I wasn't getting cast in enough sci-fi nerd stuff,
Mm.
and I wanted that, and so that for me, that was part of the goal, was to create the opportunity, and in the process it also created some opportunities for others, is you know which was really quite an equal goal for me. I wanted everyone to have more opportunity, and since then I've continued to pursue that, and occasionally been able to create some opportunities for folks. Well, I think one thing though that is important for me as a producer, if I'm casting myself, and I don't always do that, and I think that's important for me to say. For me, you know I'm conscious of wanting certain roles and occasionally creating those opportunities, but I don't cast myself unless I believe I'm the right fit. And there have been multiple times where I've run a project and run the project with the idea of, oh yeah, I'll cast myself in that role, that's great for me, and then someone else will audition and I'll go, okay, Eric, you're out.
That's
Sorry. you know.
That speaks to your character because if I don't know if I could do that. I'd be like,
Well,
well,
also,
he's better, but I'm still going to do it. I don't care.
when you know, there ultimately, I think this is critical for everyone on every aspect of a production: actor,
Mhm.
director, producer, you know, cinematographer, audio, audio folks, etc. I'm going to slaughter the correct titles, but basically, you know, you serve the project.
Yeah.
You serve the
Hmm.
narrative. You serve what's ultimately your piece of art that is intended to create community with your audience. And if anything you do doesn't serve that, you're wrong.
So, so what was it like to play the same character three times? Because you've played John Burns now in three well, I mean, we created a trilogy out of that first
Yeah,
writing
yeah.
Fren-Zee film. So what was that like? I mean, I don't think a lot of actors get to play the same character three different times.
You're right, and especially with so many, with years in separation, that's quite
Hmm.
interesting. I've
Yeah.
played characters in series, and that's one thing, and it's quite interesting. I've played characters in plays that had a long, story arc. I've played characters in movies that had a story arc, but to step away and come back, and step away and come back, it's almost BBC style.
Yeah.
Um, so it's really interesting, and it's been particularly interesting with John because again, there's so many personality similarities. What is to some degree, it's the same thing that you get when you're playing a character in a series, which is that you learn about them over time. And it also happens actually when you're in a theater show in particular, because there's a run, right? And so you start with your opening night, and well, of course, your rehearsals and all that, and then you get into opening night, and then once you're implementing on stage, you start to discover new things. And if there's a long run, you discover a lot of things over time. You're saying the same lines, doing functionally the same things, but your understanding of the characters evolving. And if you're
Hmm.
really alive in the role, then every performance is a growth from the last.
Hmm.
With
A little bit
John,
different each time.
yeah, exactly. And so with John, it's been similar in that, when I first met John, as I like to put it, when I first met John, I understood certain things about him. And then throughout the course of playing him and writing Fren-Zee, I learned about him and evolved my understanding of who he was as a person and what he cares about, what motivates him. And so then stepping away for a while, but still having that wonderful experience firmly set in my mind. When we did Writing Frenzy, at this point, my knowledge of him grew quite a lot. And of course, the script and the other characters and the other performers, and of course, our directors and so on, further informed me about who he was in relation to other people, which is a lot of how people evolve. They change and grow depending upon the stimulus given to them, mostly by other people.
Hmm.
And so, understanding what was happening in his world at the time brought yet greater clarity of who he is as a person, and made me respond, I think, in a much more nuanced way. Despite that, this is kind of it's still goofy comedy, but there's comedy doesn't work if there isn't any reality in it. And
Hmm. Yeah.
so you still have to search your soul and respond truthfully, and maybe use some comedic techniques to make it a little extra funny. But ultimately, if you're not responding from a place of feeling something, it's flat and it just isn't funny. So it was always that matter as now there's some time in between, and that was also the way the script was written. Although less time in the real world than was in the script, from writing Frenzy to Revenge of Zoe. I gained a lot of new perspective, and it was comfortable. I could walk into John and still be challenged to find how he felt about certain things, and then to feel that and let it come out, and then of course do all the technical stuff you have to do as an actor as well. But you know, but that process was less of a struggle because he never left me. He continued to grow, as do all the characters that I play. They kind of live in me somewhere, and
Hmm.
I even kind of check in with them sometimes, and every once in a while they kind of come out. I'll be doing something, and they'll come out. I'll have a skill set I don't actually have suddenly, or I'll approach something from a completely different perspective because I had to be that person for a while. And so John comes out every once in a while still. So that was really interesting. And then playing him again in Love Song, it the script itself again is was a was a completely different phase of his life and Pete's life and the other characters in that world, and things were, I think, a lot more on edge for him than they were in the other scripts. They were,
I'd agree with
you
that.
know, things were much more urgent, and he didn't have his one safety zone for a lot of the film, which was Pete. And so I learned a lot more about him again playing him in Love Song, especially as he wasn't with his basically his soulmate, um, and he had to fly alone, and he realized that as much as he liked to think that he knew everything, boy, he really didn't, and he had to kind of unfortunately acknowledge that Pete knew a lot of things he didn't, and as is I think quite brilliantly and in very funny ways evidenced by what happens in John's store versus Pete's, and I won't drop any spoilers, but there's some really funny stuff. Um, so and then as we towards the end of the film, as there's well, I don't want to spoil anything again, but let's just say that John and Pete do talk. Um, it who he is as a person becomes that much more clarified, and so it's just been a very interesting evolution of character, and it's been nice to not just let a character evolve in my own psyche, but actually then work that with other performers over a period of time. And it's also been quite nice that some of them are really, are the same people. So you're all kind of checking in, not just with each other, but you're checking in with your characters as they've grown.
It's been fun to watch for sure. From I mean, from my I sit behind the camera and watch everything that goes on, so it's been fun to watch you evolve as watch you have not. I wouldn't say evolve as an actor. I don't mean that in
Well,
that sense.
but
It's like
it's true. I do. I mean,
yeah,
if you're
well,
not
yeah. I
evolving as
mean,
an actor, you're not a
as
very
you
good
practice, you
actor, in
get
my
better. Sure,
opinion.
sure. Yeah, as you practice your craft, you get better. But I mean, you were already good when we hired you. I didn't mean to imply that, but what I meant was to watch you grow with the character as an actor. It was very, very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
When we got on the set of Revenge, it was you remember those early days. I remember you being very locked in very early.
Yeah,
Right? Where
yeah.
it was like you weren't searching for anything. We weren't
Mm-hmm.
doing extra takes because you couldn't find where John was. It
Mm-hmm.
was there he is right there.
Mm-hmm.
Go. It was really fun to watch.
Thank you. Yeah, it's and actually, I do want to speak to that one thing, which is evolution, because it's not just a character evolution. I mean, acting, like any other really profound art form, is an evolution of the mind, the soul, the spirit, the body, everything, and the art form. I mean, if you're a pretty good painter, and 10 years later you paint exactly the same way with the same level of skill, what is wrong with you? You're not doing art anymore, you're just copying.
Mhm.
And so, uh, as an actor, every character also teaches me more about acting, and every film teaches me more about acting. It's an interesting process, I got to say, in that, at least for me, and I should say for me, everyone has a really a different experience, and I shouldn't, say that anyone's process is less valid than any others. They are not. Everyone
Mhm.
has their own story arc and their own growth arc and their own who
Yeah,
they are as a performer.
everybody arrives there a different way,
Yeah, and
but
you know what?
you still got to
Even if
get there.
somebody plays the same thing the same way all the time,
Mhm.
maybe that's their joy. And so I don't want to take away from that. But for me, because I'm always, I push myself very, very hard, very, 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 very hard, because I want to be at my apex every second I'm on the screen, which I
Mhm.
don't always accomplish. In fact, from in my opinion, I rarely accomplish. But by pushing that hard, I have moments that I wouldn't have otherwise, and sometimes they're pure magic. And
Mhm.
so, what is I find that with it's a little bit different with John because I played him for so long. A little bit different, but generally speaking, with each role that I take on, especially since again I often take on roles that are not me and are far away from who I am as a person, um, I almost have to relearn acting. I have to take all of the process that I have and all the skills that I have and all the tools that I have and adapt them to something very new. And oftentimes it's terrifying because I've taken a role. I know I'm capable of playing the role from past experience of playing lots of roles that are challenging, but I the one golden rule for me, again, you serve the project, and so that is, if I'm walking on set for my part, I will not fail my team. I will not fail them. So I will do everything in my power to not fail them. And when there are those moments where it's like the lines aren't coming, the emotion isn't coming, something isn't working, it's absolutely terrifying. And those are the worst moments for me as an actor. When I find it and when it's all working, after going through that process, it's like climbing a mountain, climbing an emotional and spiritual mountain, and I've reached the top. And then I do it again. Hey, it's Everest but taller. With different crags, you know. So really, it is an evolution, and so all of the other stuff that I've done in between John, and all of the times that I've played John, were also, they were an evolution of John, but it was an evolution of me as an actor and as a person, because I think that's also important to the art, is that you grow as a person and grow your understanding of, you know, the world's people, spirit, everything, and so that also informs how well I can interpret what I've learned about John and how well I can put that out on the screen.
It's interesting when you talk about evolution. William Goldman's book, Which Lie Did I Tell? He talks about actors, and he doesn't talk very fondly about them at times. And he specifically talks about a certain type of actor that doesn't ever grow, doesn't ever evolve, because they find that one. They find that one character that the audience responds to, and then he said, no matter what movie they're in, they're always trying to get that character back into the film, right?
Sure.
So, if you watch a Clint Eastwood movie, it's Clint Eastwood. It's the same sort of, and no knock on Clint Eastwood. I like his movies. But it's the same kind of guy. If you watch, you know, Dirty Harry to Any Which Way But Loose to hell, $1 Million Baby. Sure, it's the same guy, right? And the same character, I guess. The same, I don't know, internal workings of the character. You can kind of see it and feel it, right? Like he's playing somebody else, obviously, but there's still that gruff old tough guy thing, right? Which is very interesting. That's like Tom Cruise. You know, action event movies. Sure, that's what I do. I'm Tom Cruise, and great, good on him. I mean, Top Gun, the last Top Gun was fantastic.
Well, I think it's, I would like to, you know, and I want to address that also. I think there are different types of actors. And so, you know, I kind of want to retract one of the statements I made earlier in one regard.
No retractions here.
Damn it. But, you know, but I do think it's important to note that there are different kinds of actors, and that there are two sides to performance as an actor. You know, there's the art and there's the business. And there's also, you know, there's different layers of actors. I mean, some actors, their whole art is evolving that one character through decades, and that's an art. It is
perfect example of Eastwood.
Yeah, Eastwood, or even, you know, and in fact, Tom Cruise gets a lot of shade, but I have a lot of respect for him as a performer.
Oh yeah, I'm not shading him at all. I do too. But he found that character and he went for it.
Yeah, and you know, and you've seen that evolve over time, and yet it's functionally the same person. Functionally the same character, just as it has been for a lot of other people, Jack Nicholson, etc. And here's the thing about that kind of actor is that one, maybe that's artistically fulfilling for that person. I certainly hope it is, and they certainly do seem to put a lot out on screen when they're playing that same person over and over again. But audiences also, you know, particularly within certain genres or within certain personalities that they click with, often do like to see that character portrayed over and over again. It's kind of like fan fiction in a way. It's like, well, so now what if I took the character from Die Hard and I put him in a sitcom?
Yeah.
That's interesting and I admit I find that interesting as well.
That's family.
As an artist myself, I that's not me. You know, as an artist myself, I feel the call to stretch my boundaries as far as I can stretch them within reason. And that's what lights me on fire is getting over that Mount Everest and going, climbed another really difficult, confusing, almost insurmountable mountain, and actually, you know, and actually was somewhat believable. That's great. I did Fantastic. That. That's good. And that's the kind of art where, you know, but there's also a downside to that from a career perspective, which is that, you know, people don't know how to cast you a lot of the time, except in the last.
Well, Hollywood wants a repeatable, bankable thing, which is why you see Tom Cruise in a bunch of movies. You know,
I've been told by casting directors and various other people in the Hollywood world, you know, create a personality card. I forget the name that they use for it, but create a card, and it basically tells people this is the kind of character you play, and this is and here's we're going to orient you to look this way, and I say, no, sorry. I mean, I get it. I understand. If you see, if I always play the best friend character, then it's really easy to cast me as the best friend character. And I understand that that could be really beneficial to my career. But again, if everyone had only seen me as John Burns or as Frank Mann, who would have cast me as Doc Holliday? Who would have cast me as Wyatt Earp? Who would have cast me as and Bill in Horse Camp, or any of these other really unusual characters that I've had the opportunity to play? And for me, again, as an art, it's like basically I got a slab of stone, and I need to find I need to find the statue in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I personally nerd out on that. I mean, I do love the work of some of those actors who play the same character over and
Mm-hmm.
over again. But on the other hand, the ones who I really click with are, those actors who disappear like I try to do.
Well, as far as evolving from each project, what was it like stepping into a producer role in Revenge of Zoe with us, as well as acting again in the project?
Interesting question. Yeah. So there's producing and there's producing, and for the layman, for those who just aren't familiar with the industry, when you say you're a producer, nobody actually knows what the hell that is. um, because there's a
Still
lot of
don't.
different kinds of producers,
Just
and
kidding.
it's actually gotten more confusing lately because just by the nature of the necessity of funding things, oftentimes people get a producer title for contributing some money to crowdfunding or something, and that's not invalid. When you put money into a project, that's part of producing. That's a type of producing.
Mm-hmm.
um, you know, but then there's the on the ground getting it done producers, and there's lots of different kinds of those depending upon the project. It has become a rather nebulous term for those who are involved at a higher level, a decision making type level typically, or or a larger team running level, um, on a project that isn't something as specific as assistant director. So. Uh, so it's a lot of the stuff that I've produced were things where I was the producer, the one who got it going and basically made the main decisions and handled all the business end and everything else. And then maybe there were other people working under me in that process, but I was the final call. So in this case, this is, this was, this was, and I've been hired as a producer as well on projects where it was very clear this is your only role, and here's your check, go do this, you know, and and in our world, it's a little different in that on the one hand, it's always ultimately you guys, Marty and Cliff, are the primary decision makers. It's your baby. On the other hand, there's such a familiarity built that I can consult a lot more than I would on some of those other hired producer projects.
Mm-hmm.
And of course,
Level of trust between all of us.
yeah,
Yeah.
and our general agreement was, handle what you're best at, and maybe a couple other things too, because we don't have a large team.
Yeah, because everybody's wearing 9 hats.
Yeah, it's just the necessity of a small indie film. So it's been a pretty overall. I mean, there's certainly been challenges, and there's always um, just by the nature of making a movie, there's always, especially when you're on the top level decision making team or close to it, you see a lot more of the scary stuff and the challenges than you allow the cast and the crew to see. But overall, it's been really mostly a very smooth collaboration, and and it wasn't. I mean, it was different for me in that I had more duties. So on the
Mm-hmm.
one hand, as it always is when I do any producing stuff and act, it's a challenge because there's a lot to do, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm still working as an actor.
Mm-hmm.
It's been nice that I was playing John, because even though I'm still growing in that character, um, I knew him so well that I wasn't like, it wasn't like trying to find a character that I had no familiarity with at all and going through that, for me, extremely challenging and time consuming process while also producing, which I have done before. Um, but, you know, so at least there was that, and I didn't have to do quite as much prep work for John second time around and the third time around. But it was also, I mean, it was one of the more comfortable producing experiences in general because it was also I've been a hired gun as a producer in some cases where I would work with someone who did not necessarily have a lot of producing skill sets previously, and so it's sometimes hard to make your point when someone doesn't have experience. And in this in this case, it's like I have something to say, I'm going to say it, you'll understand it, and then you'll make a decision, and most of the time it works. you know, and that's a lot easier. It's been you know, it's so I guess I don't know if I'm answering the question well because it's been a lot of things overall though. um, you know because we had this trust and this friendship and this collaboration built over years, and over the years, of course, I mean, like any creative collaboration, we've also had some arguments and stuff, and and then come through that
Argument? Me?
and
Nah, never.
grown as as people and gotten closer as a result of it. A lot of that stuff was out of the way. So and so as a result, it was, I think, one of the more pleasant producer collaboration experiences where I wasn't top dog, because I knew that basically I felt like we all had each other's backs,
Mm-hmm.
and there wasn't you know um, we weren't going to have child arguments
Right.
that you might have when you're first working with somebody that are, about, figuring out territory or boundaries and all those other things. We know that stuff very well and respect each other. And so, it's really going to be more about, if there is an argument, it's only going to be about, you know, about
What
serving the
serves the project?
project.
Yeah.
And because we set those boundaries at the beginning, even if I disagreed with something, which I must say was quite rare, quite
Huh.
rare. But
Well, that's
even if
good.
I did disagree with something, we decided what the hierarchy ultimately was because it's necessary to have one. And okay, there it is. Decision made. I've said my piece.
Hmm.
And again, like proofs in the pudding. It worked. Um, and uh, and that's nice. It's also been quite nice. There've been times where I've um, produced in a partnership and you know and ended up doing more than I'd bargained for, and wasn't always sure if everyone could do their part, and that it's also nice to know that, like, if Marty's planning the shoot, I don't have to worry about that. I don't have to worry about it. If you guys are collaborating on directing, you don't need me to say anything, except, hey, I don't know if you noticed this, but there's he has a black eye. Didn't have it
Right.
yesterday, and
Right.
I mean, stuff that just might have gotten missed with too many things. But generally speaking, so it's really nice to know that when there's a handoff, it's handed off.
Well, we believe, and I think we've said this a bunch, and I know Marty and I, we would talk about it all the time, but film is collaborative.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole point of making a film and bringing all that talent together is to draw the best out of them and get them to contribute to the project, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, yeah,
if you're stifling that, or if you're ignoring it, you're really you're hurting yourself.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Also one thing about that hierarchy issue too, it's like, going into this knowing, look, you guys wrote the script, you're directing it, you have a specific vision for the project, and so, I've seen situations where somebody's been hired as a director or producer or whatever else, or where, on very small sets, there isn't a real hierarchy that's clear, or maybe the director or producer isn't very strong in their leadership skills, and so there ends up, you end up with a lot of creative arguments that come from places they have no business coming from.
Mm-hmm.
Like an actor arguing over a shot, which is not their purview to argue over, and
Yeah, that's not an
you know,
argument I want.
or trying to direct from the acting place, and so also because that hierarchy has been well set, and there's a respect built. Um, Certainly, there were a few times where there'd be an edit decision or a take decision or some other decision that I was just like, I simply don't agree with that. I don't think that's going to play well. And you know what? other capable people have a creative vision that I can't see because I'm not looking at this from the same perspective. So okay, and that's so it's not something that I stew on afterwards because again, generally speaking, the result is in what's all put together, and so just knowing, having worked with you guys before, I know that there's not a lot of stones left unturned. So even if I disagree with something in that moment, um, I also know from experience that you typically have actually thought this through, and the reason perhaps that I'm disagreeing it is either I'm just a different artist, which is absolutely valid, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not, but it's not my script, or uh, or that I don't see the same picture that you see because you started writing the words
Hmm.
and I've
Well,
been
that's the
reading them,
great
so it's
thing
different.
about it's the great thing about working with a lot of the same people over and over again is because we've developed a level of trust with them, and it
Yeah,
goes back to what you're saying about you can realize like, oh, I trust that they know what they're doing and they have the vision that serves the film in mind as well. So,
yeah. And even if the rare occasion happens where it doesn't all quite work, and maybe you saw it coming, um, welcome to film. It's hard.
especially
It's
with no
hard.
budgets.
It's hard.
Hmm.
Yeah, no, and and that's the other thing. Also, like one of the tough things that I think for anyone who isn't familiar with making film, and especially making film on a lower budget level, is that, and it's true also on a higher budget level, I should add, is that
True.
there are times where you, as a creator, you have to pick your battles. And there's times where you go, yes, I'm aware of that flaw, and we're
Mm-hmm.
moving on because
Yep.
we're out of time, we're out of
Yep.
money. We have these other circumstances to consider, and somebody might complain about that, but they don't know that you have 10 more minutes on that set,
Hmm.
period. Or
Movies
that
aren't finished; they escape.
yeah, or yeah, really, or whatever the case might be. There's often, I mean, another whole aspect that some people don't realize is that as a director and a producer, there are things you have to keep confidential about your cast and your crew for their emotional safety and other reasons. And so, somebody may complain about something, and you simply cannot explain why you're doing what you're doing.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
so again, when there's that level of trust, you don't have to tell me that. There's a reason. That's all I need to know.
Hmm.
It reminds me of Revenge we had God I have to go through and count it, but there's over 20 slaps in that movie.
Oh, easily.
I mean, I'm
Poor,
talking full on facial
poor, poor
slaps.
Nate.
Poor Nate. And there's that one it's a great outtake, but there's that one scene where you're smacking him over and over again, and I'm just like, hit him again. And he's just standing there with his cheek out, like, go ahead, dude. And he
Yeah.
keeps telling me, go ahead, keep going. And then at one point he looks at me and he goes, at one point you're not kidding. And I think my response was, hit him again. And we got the take, and he trusted us enough. He understood what we were doing.
Yeah.
He knew we weren't up there just having you smack him because it was fun. Well, that was the reason. It was hilarious, but we weren't doing it to ridicule him or to
Yeah, it
make or to
serves
hurt
the
him. It
Yeah.
movie.
was we
So
needed
and
that perfect slap.
here's a secret about that too, for me. So again, I'm not a fight choreographer, and when I work with a fight choreographer, I follow their instructions to the letter because they know what's going to look good, they know what's going to sell, and they know what's going to be
Hmm.
safe.
Yep.
And there are times though where you actually have to slap someone to slap someone, and hopefully they roll with it, and you've timed it right, and it's not going to be a hard slap. But every once in a while, there's an error, and now add to this that I spent many years studying as a martial artist. So if I really slap someone, I can slap very, 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 very hard and very fast. And so there's a little piece of me in the back that's always going, if I'm connecting here, and this is actually an area that I have trouble with as an actor because, you have to let go and play the scene so that it seems real. And on the other hand, there's this little thing in the back of my head going, don't kill him.
Yeah.
Don't kill him. Don't put your hip into this. Don't go full force. Don't do all the stuff that would do a really solid hit. And so sometimes that plays with your head a little bit, and you can't. It's really hard. That's one of the hardest things for me to do as an actor is actually strike someone and make it look real and pull it. Um, and I usually get there, And but there's just that worry that you
Mm-hmm.
slip and do it right, not wrong.
Well, the ironic part is you were the one who actually got hurt doing the slap scene because you fell and you missed the safety
Yeah.
mask,
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a
Yeah.
really good point.
Yeah.
and he got right back up and did another take.
It's
Well,
fantastic.
yeah, and I did fall wrong too, and so I was in pain. But that's what you do, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
if you're as an actor, if you're capable of continuing, you continue.
Right.
um, you know, and unless it's like something that seriously needs to be looked at right away medically.
Yeah.
But I've also as someone I have done some, I obviously have done fight scenes, and there have been accidents occasionally, and I've gotten hurt, and of course, again, as a longtime martial artist, I have a pretty good gauge as to what's a bad hit. And so, I knew from that moment, that's going to smart, and I'm going to need ice. I can wait a few
Mm-hmm.
minutes. Okay, let's get
Right.
this done.
Yep. We all take our lumps.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, dude. So Eric, just out of curiosity, I don't think I ever asked you this before, but um, in writing Fren-Zee, your John is he meets Jen, right? The beginning of the
Mhm.
relationship,
Yeah.
and we kind of hint towards the strange things that you two are going to be into later with the whipped cream, scene.
I didn't see that coming at all, by the way.
Well, and Marty and I, as I got to be honest. I mean, Marty and I took that and then cranked it up to 11
The
and put it in
evolution.
the
Yeah.
script. And I've just always been curious. I don't think we don't get to talk a lot about this type of stuff when we're on set because we're just so busy. But I'm just really curious what your thought process was when you got those those two screens. The first one and then the second one. You're like, oh my god.
Well, okay. So first off, inside info here. Especially after working on John the Alien interviews, Cliff, in particular, audience, has a thing, and that thing is that when we work together, he likes to write something that he knows I'm really going to be uncomfortable with, but that
I
as a performer, I will
Yes,
find so good that I
yes.
personally have to agree to do anyway, or I
I do
can't
torture my
live with
actors.
myself.
It's a thing. It's
And
a thing. I
and
do.
and come
Just a
on,
little
Cliff,
bit.
you particularly like torturing me. Let's get
It's the
real here.
stress
Yes,
level.
I
And don't
do.
get me wrong, I appreciate that about you.
I
In context, I know
I
you're
enjoy.
actually coming from a good place with it.
Oh God, yes.
I know that.
Because
I
I know
know
you're
that
going to pull it
beyond
off
a
and it's going to be
shadow of a
hilarious.
Serves the
doubt. I know
movie.
you're coming from a
Yeah,
good place with it.
it's like Lyndon having to eat pickle relish, an apple
Yes,
pie.
yes. Which he, got really sick to his stomach over afterwards, and he was still glad he did it.
I feel
Um,
terrible. I
Back
feel
in
terribly
Jaws.
got sick, but at
yeah,
the same time, I knew it
for,
was going to
for
be
Rob
hilarious to
Linden, yeah,
watch.
who played John in John the Alien Interviews, a dear friend and a wonderful performer. So basically, you know, uh, so I got the script for Revenge of Zoe, and it has all these scenes where John and Jen are basically cosplaying in their sex life, and
They're
uh, and
exploring
and
themselves.
yeah, and it's just it's how they do it, and it's how they enjoy themselves together. And it seemed, at first it was like, boy, that actually really clarifies something about John because he's really uptight most of the time, and it's
Hmm.
like at home with Jen, he's a little bit different. He actually, you know, with this person who he trusts in this way,
It's free.
he's freer. Yeah, he doesn't have to be the boss. He doesn't have to be the guy who's keeping it all together as Pete's causing chaos, right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
and so and also there's this layer of trust between he and Jen,
Yeah,
Sarah Jackson, who played Jen in the second two films, did just a
she's
wonderful job. We had
fantastic.
wonderful on-screen chemistry. Just
Yeah.
really great to work with her. So so that was my first thought, and then I got to the mermaid scene, and the mermaid scene, wearing a mermaid costume, and my first thought was Cliff, fucker.
Well, let's. I mean,
You're messing with me again.
it's a mermaid suit from the waist down. So he's got a mermaid outfit on that's got it's
Mhm.
made out of what is that, like
It was
not rhinestones, but
it
it's
was it was
a
a shiny fabric basically
shiny fabric.
sewed into a
and,
fishtail type thing,
yeah, and a
mermaid
fishtail, and then he's
bottom,
got a seashell bra on with a
seashell
bare
bra,
chest
and
and
don't forget the
and a
seashell
tiara
crown.
and a
It was a
tiara. Yeah.
seashell tiara.
Yes.
Yes, and it was cuffed to the bed,
Yeah, and you're handcuffed to
while
the
while
headpost.
while Jen is on top of John in a pirate outfit. So that was So my first thought was Cliff, and my second thought was, oh my God, this is funny. There's no way I can't do this. So I was very nervous about shooting the scene. I was really nervous about it, and I was nervous about what people would think about it. But ultimately, it was, and what it would do to my image and all that, actor, branding stuff. But at the end of the day, every time I have been in a place where that film was screening, that is the one scene that people laugh the hardest and the longest at, and which is score. So once again, it was like, I mean, I'd like to think, despite the fact that Cliff does have this slightly sadistic thing with me going on, that he likes to torture me, and as my wife says, I react so well. That's why she does it. But but there's also, but ultimately, I think I'd also like to think that part of this is because that I'll see the comedy in it, I'll know it has to be done, and that I'll appreciate that for what it is, because ultimately, again, I serve the film, I serve the project, and my goal with a comedy, I mean, with a comedy like this, my goal is, my artistic goal overall is, one, to give the audience an experience that they will walk away from feeling really feeling love for the characters in the story, feeling like they've been uplifted through it. And the other part is, I want them to laugh hard. And so if that means a mermaid outfit, let's get the fishtail, man.
Yeah, gotta be fearless. Gotta be fearless.
One of the best actors I've ever worked with, who, oh my God, his name's escaping me right now, which is awful, but a wonderful actor I've worked with in California. Oh my gosh, I hate when that happens. But once said to me, I hate when that happens. But once said to me that if you want to be a good actor, you have to have no shame.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what goes through my mind in that thought process when I get the next mermaid costume is, okay, I got to do this. Well, wait a minute. As an actor, I have to have no shame. And this is actually, it is important. It is important as an actor, I think, both as overall in your growth as an actor and spiritually as a performer, is that you've got to continuously remind yourself you are not that person. That's really what acting is to become someone else, and what is real for that person is real for that person, not what's real for you. So certainly you have to have boundaries, and that is important, and everyone has to be in agreement about what is going to happen on a scene, particularly when there's a bed and people on top of each other involved. That's extremely important. And when there's fight scenes or anything dangerous, all that stuff, you've got to really make sure everyone's on the same page and okay with it and not being coerced. That being said, once you're past all that, you commit to the moment. You do it the right way. You are careful and thoughtful in the process. But what the audience needs to see something real. And because, again, if I was letting any of my personal reservations come out, and I wasn't letting go in that moment and just being John, it wouldn't have been funny. Mm-hmm. It would have just been a guy in a mermaid suit, not a guy freaking out in a mermaid suit. That's what's funny,
a guy in a mermaid suit.
Or uptight John in a mermaid suit. That's funny,
It's normal to them. Yeah.
And I should add, uptight John in a mermaid suit is a lot less funny without casual Jen in a pirate suit taunting him.
Right. Making fun of him.
I mean, some wonderful bits.
I had a big argument with, of course, we had that documentary crew following us around for that film, and listeners, the documentary's not coming out. It didn't happen, but they followed us around quite a bit here and there. And I remember that night that we shot that scene, Jen's, Sarah playing Jen's got some, I mean, not risque, but there's enough skin revealed and kissing going on that I've never shot that stuff before. So I was kind of uncomfortable trying to figure it out. And I wanted to talk to her and say, where's your level of comfort here? Mm-hmm. Right? Like let's get on the same page. Yeah. And I remember the documentary crew being adamant that they be involved in that conversation and that they be in the room when it happened. And I said, absolutely not. You're going to be out of the room while she and I align with where our comfort levels are. I don't want that on camera.
That's a tricky. I didn't know that part, and that's a tricky situation because on the one hand, it's documentary crew. They want to get real stuff. They're looking for good meat for a documentary that people will enjoy. And on the other hand,
also very protective of everyone too.
Yeah, I'm extremely protective.
Oh, I know it, and I have to say that aside from my teasing you about your sadistic haunting of me. I actually really respect that about both of you guys, and in particular, Cliff. When you feel that someone particularly in your cast, could have possibly been mistreated by someone, it's like the hammer of
Yeah,
God. It's just gonna, bam,
no, it's
and
gonna
and I
happen.
and that's a good thing. It's we all have heard stories, and I've experienced some stuff. Everyone has, where there's also directors who are so committed purely to what goes on screen that they leave a lot of damage in their wake with the artists they're working with. And I do think that as a director and a producer myself, one of the things that I particularly respect about your process is that, you know when I am producing and directing, again, I don't always get it right. I try really hard. I try really hard with everything to get it right. But my goal, aside from making sure that the project is at its best, is I understand that as if I'm in a leadership position, part of my job is to look out for everybody else and try to make them okay too, so that they can give their best and they walk away as unscathed as possible.
Hmm.
And so when I hear some of the worst stories, I haven't been involved in anything truly awful, fortunately. But when I hear some of the worst stories about performers who've just gone through hell and like were emotionally scarred for life because of something a director had them do, and the way that it was done, that's unconscionable to me. It's entirely unconscionable. And so I've seen you, you know, generally speaking, the people that are brought onto sets as well are pretty decent people. So it's very rare, but I've seen a couple of occasions where you thought that somebody was possibly being, spoken to the wrong way or something, and just, hey, stop everything, knock it off. Come here, we're going to talk. And that's a Cliff impersonation, except I use less cussing.
Yes, yeah. I was gonna say you need more vulgarity.
Yeah.
Yeah, we tend to be fairly serious and
Very
get our job done on set, but we also like to have a lot of fun. I think that's what brings people back time and
Mhm.
time again. They hear we're making another project and they're like, "Hey, I want to be there. When are you doing it?" So,
Yeah.
Eric,
yeah.
what were some of your like favorite moments on the set with us?
Oh gosh,
I know it's a
long
big one. Yeah.
list. Long list.
Yeah, just pick one or two. We don't have all day here, buddy. I know you love us. I know you love us.
Yeah, true that. Well, I mean, okay. So one thing, it turned into a favorite moment in the film as well. But I'll start with on writing Fren-Zee. Um, so Julie's character Sarah is, you know, there's a scene where a guy, kind of tries to make the moves on her in the comic book store, and she grabs a valuable comic book and beats the crap out of him with it, and then hands it to John. And we played that a number of times, and I just remember as an actor that was a lovely moment
Mhm.
where I watched that occur, and then she hands me the comic book. I have this visceral, beaten up comic book in my hand, and we had a moment together, and that was a really nice moment. Of course, all the getting to know folks on the set moments and the other times there. Revenge of Zoe. Let me see if I can come up with a one out of so many. Well, ultimately, I
That
think
was a
it
hell of a
really
shoot.
was. It really was. Yeah, I mean, it was the whole shoot, but I think it really was, for me, the probably the best moment was actually overall executing that mermaid scene,
Hmm.
because it was so bloody absurd, and yet there was, but it was a good crew basically operating together well, and then it was, as an actor moment. Again, it's a lot of these are people moments, and it was a compromising, tricky position for both of us as actors, and yet it was just another really nice moment of just pure professionalism where it worked very well, and there was
Yeah,
no,
that night really went well. It was. I mean,
overall.
it was a lot to shoot, and I think there were 6 people in that room, 7 people in that room while you guys were doing that
Hmm.
scene. A
Yeah.
lot of people in that. It was a tiny bedroom with a big bed, and it
Mhm.
was. But
Hmm.
it was. I remember it being a lot of fun. Like it was
Totally.
tough to shoot, but we got it done, and it was actually a lot of fun. A lot of laughing during that shoot.
There was, and so that was really, those were some nice moments there, and some nice character moments, which were especially good for me. Just because to do a scene like that, I mean, I hardly I'm not close with Sarah or anything, and I hardly knew her at all at the time, but just the chemistry that we had in those moments as actors was rock solid. It really
Yeah.
worked, and it felt
Yeah.
good, and it felt, not awkward once we started working. And let's see, there's just so many. I think, yeah, certainly the moment where we did where wonderful Bradford Trojan, is tossed out of the um, the the bar and
Oh
towards the beginning
yeah.
of the film,
Oh
and
God,
there was
the
so
one
much
the one
sweat
stunt.
that we didn't. There was no proper budget to bring on a true stunt coordinator, and but a lot of thought went into making that safe, and a lot of research and consulting people, and
And it worked.
and I might add that I called in a favor from Rob Linden, who's an expert fight choreographer and stunt guy, and that helped. And then we all kind of worked together and came up with pieces. And so all of this sweat for weeks of trying to figure out how to do that safely and well. And Geoff Notkin, of course, working on getting the newspaper to fly out of the
Bless
trash
him.
bags in just exactly the right way. And
Just
one
perfect.
take,
Yep.
Bradford, and all the, of course, the work prepping him for the fall because he had to do it. And one take, he lands perfectly safely. The newspapers fly up in the air. It's a perfect
It's
shot. That
beautiful.
was a
It's
wonderful moment.
beautiful.
Absolutely
Yep.
perfect shot, and it's funny as hell.
Yep.
So that was a great moment. I'm trying to. I mean, and I have to say also, unfortunately, Charlie's Comics no longer exists. But
Mhm.
Charlie was so wonderful to us, and just the moments of being in a real live comic book store in between shots, both on writing Fren-Zee and on Revenge, and in particular on Revenge because I bought some stuff in between takes. Um,
Oh, yeah.
but just
Every time I stepped in that
it's
store, I bought some.
when you're in the middle of the real thing and you're actually in the live environment. It was quite an interesting process, and I think it helped me stay in character. And then God, on Love Song, geez, I mean, again, a lot of the best moments were also the hardest. I was not in great shape when we were shooting the weird costume scenes for Love Song. Basically, I just managed to be an idiot and get myself really dehydrated. Nothing else was particularly wrong, and also we were, the COVID-19 pandemic was really just kind of becoming something we were aware of,
Yeah, that
and
was going to be my follow-up
and it
question
was
was how you felt about
very
that.
very frightening. And so between those two things and managing to get extremely dehydrated, which put me in really danger, but we had one day to shoot all this stuff. It was what I found to be profound about that. So now I'm again working with Sarah, and and we really hadn't talked since Revenge, but there goes that chemistry as performers again. And I was dizzy. I was pale as a ghost. I was not doing well, hydrating as much as I could once I realized I'd gotten dehydrated.
And it
And
doesn't show
then
in the performance. Yeah, good.
No.
exactly, the cameras roll, and these are the moments as an actor that you really remember. Is like the cameras roll, nothing else exists.
Mhm.
It's John and Jen, and then occasionally some buzzing thing says, "Hey, look over there a little bit," and you step out of the roll for just a second to take the direction. You check in, make sure you're technically doing things right, and then it's John and Jen again, and that's what came out on screen. And yeah, the audience, I believe, will never know if they didn't hear this that I was pretty much afraid I was just going to drop. But as soon as John and Jen happened, I didn't even feel it,
Mhm.
you know.
Mhm.
And I've had other experiences like that as an actor where I was in awful shape for one reason or another. And when I'm working with the right people, it just all goes away while you're performing, and you're like you're in a completely different dimension. And that was really lovely. The other, I have to say that my other, I mean, I had some wonderful moments with Bradford. I had some, it was, I have a lot of friends on the set. Olivia is a great friend, and it was wonderful to see her again, even though I didn't get a lot of time to work with her. Um, and you know, but the because Nate and I have played these characters in 3 films over a period of years, the moments I'm not going to spoil towards the end of the film that we shot, much of which were actually shot in between waves of the pandemic a year and a half later, year and a
Mhm.
half after the other stuff was shot, were we had some really profound moments as the characters. that were the result of the personal relationship that's been built over time and a result of our mutual growth into these characters. And I think that will, I think that'll, I think it carries through on screen. But I have to say that it was, really just, they were profound moments for me as a performer and as a person. The
Oh,
other stuff I got to
definitely.
say out of Love Song though, I got to give props to, so I mean we had some amazing performers, and I wasn't there for much of it because of the way that the shoot had to be organized in the pandemic and all those other things. But the comic book store stuff that we ended up shooting, where Geoff Notkin, who's also our art director, designed the comic book store and made it look and feel just like a real comic book store, so much so that you would forget. And I mean, it's someplace I'd want to shop. And just, I mean, aside from the employees that never go in that store with those employees,
No, me
which
either.
Jeff and Gia, amazing job playing
The most annoying,
the
yeah,
most annoying comic book
the most
store
annoying comic book
employees
store
ever
clerks ever.
known.
Yep.
Beautiful job, such funny stuff. I mean, if you watch the film and you don't laugh at that, check to make sure you have a pulse. Um, but so there were some really amazing comedy scenes being done right there with people I'd worked with before and have a terrific friendship and rapport with. And then, gosh, man, the opportunity to shoot for 3 days at a live science fiction convention, one which I has meant a lot to me over the years, the Tucson Science Fiction Convention, and the way that the small production crew was allowed to come into this convention, and about 200 fans signed up to be a part of our film, and and all the guests wanted to be part of the film, and we got to just basically kind of ride on the side of this whole convention, and just the joy that people took in working with us on that film in the middle of a live convention. Which, if there are two places where I'm happiest in a public setting, it's a nerd convention or a film set, and I was in both. How cool is that? I wasn't in a film set that was a film set of a nerd convention. I was in a live operating film nerd convention and a film set at the same time with a lot of people I cared about. That was cool.
That was a Marty and I talked a lot about that. That was risky.
Oh yeah,
Super.
That could have gone very wrong.
Not just filming the Tucson, but I mean, we have some hard and fast rules for shooting movies, right? We don't allow our actors to leave sets during shoots. You are to stay on set at all times, because if you leave, bad things happen.
Things happen.
Marty and I are thinking about the same thing.
You protect it when you're here.
Yes. We another rule would be, oh gosh, there's so many of them. Marty, help me out.
But I think you're saying don't break the shoot up over several months of breaks in between.
Exactly.
Try to do it all. Get in, and
it's
Marty, it wasn't several months. It was a year and a half. That's different.
2.5 years. It was
2.5 years. You're right. Okay,
I mean,
2.5
we
years.
shot Tucson first before we shot anything else.
Tucson
just before anyone heard about the pandemic.
Yep, and that was 6 months before the pandemic, and then the pandemic. I mean, I'm flying in,
and we shoot in March of 20.
Yeah, March of 2019, and oh my goodness!
And we finished in June of 21. So and you watch the movie, and
you really can't tell.
I don't even notice anymore what's what.
I couldn't tell you what scenes were shot when.
That's wonderful. Yeah.
Well, let's talk briefly about the elephant in the room. I know we've been avoiding it a lot, but we have to talk about it.
Oh, sorry. There's an elephant in my room.
Geoff Notkin.
I don't know how you knew that.
Come on, the man, the myth. Our fourth producer.
Notkin in the shotgun.
Notkin in the shotgun.
This guy came aboard through Eric during Revenge of Zoe, and wow, we have totally clicked as a 4-person team since then.
Yeah, really.
It's really astounding.
Geoff is an immensely multi-talented person, and one of my closest friends in the world, and we'd become quite fast friends, and had worked together on things by the time that Revenge of Zoe was happening. And we were at the point where we were starting to invite each other into our projects, even if it was just like, hey, you want to do a quick thing on this? Sure, let's do it. For you, sure. I directed him. He'd hired me to do things. I'd hired him to do things. We've collaborated on things. We actually met at the Tucson Science Fiction Convention, which is, in fact, and really hit it off fast there. So at that point, and Geoff, for anyone who doesn't know, and you should, he's a, I guess you could call him a science celebrity. He spent 3 seasons as one of the two hosts of Meteorite Men on Discovery Network. Former president of the National Space Society, published author, on and on and on.
Mhm.
He's a highly accomplished person and
Definitely thank you for bringing him our way,
musician.
because wow, it was the game changer. I mean, the three of us, we had already, you could feel the switch, but when Geoff clicked in, it was like we got the band now.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
and it was, and I didn't know that it was going to be that. What happened
Right.
was basically, I reached out to Geoff and said, "Hey, I'm in this film. It's with people I know and have worked well with over the years, and it's nerd stuff. And you're a big nerd. I mean, you used to create comics." Um, uh, Side note, he was on the team that created the Pulitzer Prize-winning comic book Mouse. I mean, that's
Mhm.
like comic legendary right there. So
Absolutely.
he anyway, I said, hey, would you like to do a cameo? I'm sure the guys would be okay with that, and we've got some roles that are open. Quick scene, a couple lines, you're on and off, it'll be fun. He said,
Yeah, he
yeah,
was supposed
yeah,
to
I
come
do
and
that.
visit his
I do
own
that for
cousin,
you, Eric.
right?
Sure, and I told him a little bit more about the project. Oh, comic book. Okay, yeah, this is interesting. So he decided he was gonna, even we were doing the cast and crew read at the comic book store on the set, and he said, that he'd like to come in and observe the cast and crew read and do his 2 lines. And he did it. And then afterwards, he pulled me into the parking lot and said, "Hey, do you think Marty and Cliff would let me come on board as a producer? Because I really need to be involved in this. This is an amazing script, and that cast is awesome." And I said, "I don't think they'd say no to that, but I mean, if you're sure, I mean, I really don't want to, I don't want to insert myself where I'm not welcome." I said, "I'm pretty sure they'd be happy to have you, but let's talk to them." And, you know, the rest is history. He became the art director, he
Right.
became the music director. And of course, as we got
Oh
into
God,
Love Song, took an even more expanded role and just nailed every bit of it.
I mean, the reason that we have that great soundtrack's completely his. I mean, that's completely him. If he
Yeah,
hadn't
yeah.
been there, that soundtrack wouldn't be there. He
Yeah.
he had every contact and he knew. I mean, good Lord, that
A
man
lot
has
of
got
also
contacts.
many of our guest stars and a lot of our
Mhm.
placements of things like comic books and so on came
Mhm.
from his network of friends and colleagues.
Mhm.
But honestly, my personal opinion, I think his two greatest contributions to the project, aside from just all of the camaraderie that we've had, which is a very important thing,
Huge. Yep.
uh, the music is incredible,
Yeah.
Yep.
and and I have to say, and audiences haven't seen this yet, but Adam is so
Oh yeah.
unbelievably funny. I mean, as a character, I find him far more interesting than John. I find him far more. I mean, the dynamic that happened with him, with he and Gia and I, and our various guest cast in the comic book store scene is just so unbelievably funny. And so engaging that just that with all of the other incredibly significant creative contributions and business contributions he's made to these projects, I actually hold those two in about equal level.
Right.
Wow.
That's my opinion as a performer and someone who's been around the block a couple times. I mean, I really think audiences are going to love Adam and Tanya more than anything else in the film, to be quite honest. And there's a lot to love in this film. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, I can't wait for him to see it soon.
I
Soon
can't
enough.
either.
Soon enough.
It's
So
very soon.
we have just a handful of more questions for you today.
How big is the hand?
Well, it
We have
depends.
to
Depends
understand
on where you're
scope here.
standing in
I'm
the
in
room.
producer mode.
So a few of them are more directly film related, and we're going to spread out a little bit more. I think a good next one would be what's the best piece of direction you've ever gotten on set from a director? Is that the
Oh.
right phrasing of the question there, Cliff?
Yeah, I think so. Like, what's the
Okay.
best? Yeah. What's the best? Piece of direction or what best advice you ever got from a director or best direction, basically.
Gosh, that's so
Feedback.
hard. It's hard to pick one thing. However, I will. There's a moment that stands out um, because it was particularly transformative for me. Although I could go down a long list, but if I've got to pick one, my mind keeps racing back to this. I was doing a theater show quite some time ago, and it was a murder mystery in a small theater, and a wonderful fellow named Doug Mitchell was directing, who's also a fairly quite an experienced actor, and it was one of those moments where I'd worked the character and worked the character and worked the character. I just couldn't find him. I just couldn't find him. I'm on, we're running in just like 2-3 days, and I'm just not that guy, and it's driving me nuts. I'm having trouble sleeping. I can't think straight. I need to find this guy, and I can't find him. And he's a tough guy. He's a womanizer. An abusive asshole, basically. And just all of the different pieces of him were not meshing into what I believed was a believable character, and the director agreed with me. And he had this insight. He kind of cocked his head to the side, and he said to the stage manager, "Hey, get me a toothpick." And the stage manager got him a toothpick. He grabbed the toothpick, and he said, "Put it in your mouth." And I put it in my mouth. "This never comes out of your mouth," during the show. And suddenly, it all came together. Just click. It was that one prop that helped me to figure out who this guy was in that exact instant. And suddenly, I had a performance that audiences, they hated me, as they should. He was
Now, was that because you had something to like focus and center yourself on, or was it just the thing that sort of like that last puzzle piece that dropped in and made the picture?
It was the last puzzle piece, and it helped me to learn something, which is that while the process of finding a character for me that who is so far away from you um, involves going through a list of tools, which I'm very blessed to have been given by a lot of great teachers, and by then personal experience after that and during that. You go through a list of tools and you try to see what tool brings you to find this next level of understanding about the character. You go through your physicality, you go through your breathing, you go through your voice and your history and all these other things. And what I realized, one thing that I hadn't been focused enough on, was what something actually in the physical world. And so the next show that I did, um, I was doing another show at that same theater. I was one of the kind of regular leading actors at that theater for a while, and and I and I and it was another very different character from me. And I said, "Excuse me, does this character have a hat?" And they said, "Yeah, he has a hat. Can I have that right now? First rehearsal. I need the hat." And I had the character right then. That was it. I had the hat. So really what it is that
That's very interesting.
yeah. So as an actor, I learned that each character has certain catalysts that take you further into the knowledge of who the person is. But don't ignore, as you're doing all your internal work, which I do a lot of, don't ignore the physical, don't ignore the real world, and don't ignore that people are tactile and they like things. And so how they relate to people is how they relate to things is not quite as important, but is almost as important as how they relate to people.
Interesting.
Do you have like a dream role, or are you just more of a journeyman actor where you're looking for the challenge, or is there something in specific you're looking for?
Oh, I certainly have dream roles, and I have more than one. That's the thing. As a performer, my scope is as big as I can manage and still be believable. So, I have rarely. I really love romance films a lot, and what I love about them, and I've done a fair number of those things on stage. What I love about them from a creator standpoint is that if it's a good script and you've got good performers working with you, there's a lot of raw emotion that can happen. There's a lot of really deep emotion and a lot of to play a love relationship well on screen. It's you got to dig deep, and you've got to have at least a kind of on-screen chemistry with another performer that where you're truly relating to each other, which is a lot of the true good stuff in acting is a relationship between two characters,
Mm-hmm.
and I hardly ever get those roles. I've even even now that I've played John a number of times, typically, what I'm cast as is usually some complete really oddball character or somebody who's kind of dangerous, and so that's always a dream role for me. And then I've played a superhero exactly once, and it was in a short film when I was just making that transition from theater to film, and it was a lot of fun. But I'd really like to do that again, and I'd like to do that, in a more profound way. As a big nerd, obviously, so I play a lot of badass characters, but it would be nice to take a turn as a Batman type or something. Um, it's interesting that even though I play a lot of badasses, I've hardly ever been in a role where I'm actually able to use the martial arts side of things,
Okay,
even if I do fight
taking
scenes.
notes here for future ideas
shit,
for
right.
So
Eric.
those are a couple of big interests for me. And then aside from that, it's hard to say. Well, okay, there is one other thing that I rarely get to do, which I have had a small amount of experience in musical theater, and enjoyed it. And so I'd love to do like a sort of a musical thing at some point. I've certainly raised enjoying a lot of that. Um,
Well,
so
what's your favorite film based on music or like a musical? Do you have one?
I
Like
have
lined up?
I have a list actually. First off, as a kid I was a huge. My dad, as part of my training, used to take me to a theater in Los Angeles where we lived that only played classic movies, and I saw a lot of Gene Kelly movies and became a huge fan.
Mhm.
And so I really really love American in Paris, and
Oh,
I really love Brigadoon. And
Brigham,
as an
really?
aside, I very briefly met Gene Kelly at one point in the Beverly Hills Public Library, and got
Wow.
to have a quick chat with him, and that was you know, pretty cool for me. So I'm also a huge fan of St. Louis Blues, which is it's an amazing film that oddly not many people know about, and I think it's because of the time that it was made in. But it was it was about a famous blues musician, and the cast of players included Nat King Cole, Eartha Kitt, Cab Calloway. I mean, a laundry list of some of the most amazing blues and performers and jazz performers of the era, and they're all over this film. And there's a bunch of music scenes. It's an incredible piece of work.
Oh, I'll
With
have to check that one out.
It's really worth a watch. I mean, there's legends on screen, and again, it's like it's even hard to find information about it. Um, Purple Rain.
Hmm.
Oh yeah,
Um,
good call.
the end, basically music video where Prince sings "Purple Rain" is just a gut punch. It's amazing.
Yeah,
The Wiz,
that's a good call.
amazing
The
film.
Wiz,
Wiz,
nice.
yeah, I'm a huge fan of that as a kid. I mean, Diana Ross and Michael Jackson doing musical scenes together. Come on,
Mhm.
that's insane. Um, so those are a few of my favorites, um, and there's a
Right on.
big long list of others.
Awesome. Well, in conclusion for today, we got one more big one for you here.
Big
Now,
one.
yeah,
This is the big one.
yeah,
I need to sit.
everybody's got, everybody has secondary career interest, and outside of film, what's your other creative outlet, or what would it be if you had time for another creative outlet in this case?
I think it would be film. Yeah.
Film is your ultimate film. You don't, so
Uh,
no backup
You're
plan.
already
In other
doing
words.
film, Eric. What are you talking about?
yeah, I
Like some
know.
people would have been a painter, or some people would have been a journalist, or is there anything
Okay,
like
I mean, fair enough. I mean, I guess. Um, I mean, first off, martial arts is an art form, and that's been a
Oh,
deep
Mhm.
interest for me for a
Absolutely.
long time. So, I don't, and it's a personal adventure for me, a personal art. So there is that. If we're talking career wise, however, it's really all quite related. I mean, I'm just kind of a devout media making nerd, and I have been
Mhm.
since as long as I can remember. But I would say that one area that I have not really explored, and I've got training and experience, but I'm not the best of the best. But it is actually music, singing. It is something that I have some joy for, and so that would be interesting to explore. It's there was a point where I questioned okay, if I'm going really hardcore on something, should I veer in this direction? And I dabbled with it a bit, and then realized I love this, but you know, uh, but ultimately, the art of acting and filmmaking is the greater passion. So again, if they meld, that would be cool. But aside from that, I mean, this is me. I'm a big
Right.
I'm a big movie making media nerd, and I eat, sleep, and breathe this stuff. It's
Mhm.
my passion. It's my and it's my calling.
All right.
Um, I mean, other than ruling the world, I could do that
Well,
too.
that's probably why we click. Why all of us click. We're all, Jeff, you, me. We're all
Mhm.
mildly obsessed with this stuff.
All right.
Maybe not
Mildly.
even mildly.
Yeah, mildly is putting it mildly.
Mildly is putting it mildly. Well, I don't want people to worry about us.
Well,
Well,
let them worry.
Let them worry.
We're artists.
right.
We have to be slightly unhinged in order to in order to get a better perspective on things and deliver that.
Mhm.
You've got to be what others would consider slightly unhinged to do that.
Well, it was good talking to you today, Eric. I'm looking
Great
forward to
pleasure, guys.
getting back on a set with you in the near future.
Yep.
Really,
Thanks for
Yep.
joining
Thanks so
us on
much
our
for.
podcast journey here.
Yep. Absolutely. Thanks for being on, and we appreciate you talking to us about everything. And it's like I said, it's nice to have some sort of oral history about the
yeah,
people
no, it is. That's
and what
really
happened. So it's kind of fun.
it's cool and it's rare, and I appreciate you guys doing this, and I guess am I correct that I'm your inaugural interview?
We did the first interview. We don't know if it's the
We
first
don't know,
episode released, but
right?
you're our guinea
But
pig.
you're
Yes.
the first one. Yeah, you're the first one that we've interviewed. We were. Jeez, other than Julie, I mean, you're the longevity. You're. I mean,
And
Wow.
Paul.
what do they call that in college? You're the
Legacy.
legacy.
Wow, that's something.
Yep.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm honored, guys. Thank you. I appreciate you asking me on, and I'm glad to be part of the oral history of this. And I hope that any who have been following the films and hopefully will, and the new folks who come on board, excuse me, will. I hope that any who are following the films and any who come on board will find interesting some of the behind the scenes talk and and maybe uh, perhaps it'll give a little more insight into just the deep passion that goes
Yeah.
into these projects, and because I think I hope that comes across on screen, that there's a deep passion for um, for these characters, for these stories, and for this art form. And I have to say that it's been my great joy to be part of the world of CBDs, part of the world of John, Pete, and their insane adopted family. It's I've always and I've heard other people, I've heard fans say this, and I've said it myself. It's like these are people who you really would want to hang out with, and and it's really beautiful to be part of making art that that makes people want to hang out with your characters.
Fantastic. Well, if anybody is interested, you can see Eric in our movie Revenge of Zoe on Tubi now. So
Oh
go
yeah.
over there and check it out and see
And
what Eric was talking
yeah, and Eric, do you have anything you want to promote or plug here?
Oh, sure. When don't I? Um, well, there's other films that I've performed in or produced or whatnot that you can find on various online networks. Um, one of the more favorite ones is Tombstone Rashomon, directed by Alex Cox, in which I played Doc Holliday. That's both on Amazon and Tubi and a few other networks. There's the new streaming series Horse Camp by Patrick Ball Media,
Mhm.
which was a lot of fun. You can, of course, look for John the Alien Interviews, ZHON. And generally, there's my production company, Sealy Studios. That's SEELIE, which you can find at SealyStudios.com. There's some, in addition to the next in the Revenge of Zoe movie series, which I can't wait for the release of. There's some other really exciting projects soon to come out through that
Mhm.
through Sealy Studios, and so. Take a look there, or you can go to EricSchumacherActor.com, and I'm all over social media too. Glad to connect with people.
Nice. And we should hopefully have links to all those in our show notes. Make it easier
about.
for all the listeners.
Yep. Check our show notes. You'll see links for Eric's stuff and how to get in contact with him. All right. Well, Eric, thanks so much for showing up for Making Pondo, buddy. We really appreciate it.
Great pleasure. Did I say EricSchumacherActing.com?
You said ericschumacher.actor.com.
Oh God, no, it's ericschumacherfilm.com.
ericschumacherfilm.com.
That was brilliant.
You heard it here first.
Heard it here first. Anyway, no, great pleasure to be here. Thank you so much, guys. And I'm glad to know you. I'm glad to work with you, and very pleased to be part of the podcast.
Likewise.
Yep, it's a pleasure, Eric. All right, guys. We'll see you later.